We were just talking a little bit backstage about the reality of digitalization and the reality of air transport, and you were saying that, look at the weather we've had here for these last 48 hours. You've talked about digitalization as an add-on and not truly disruptive to your industry. What are the parts that it is going to be disruptive, or is it just still a way to enhance passengers' experience?
Well, I know this conference and many other meetings of the digital world, which you are all members of, is always about that the digital world in a way replaces the real world. And even some of big businesses in Germany are afraid to be replaced by the digital newcomers, and it happened in some industries. But honestly, flying people safely from Los Angeles to Munich, in 10,000 meters altitude and landing here in the snow is as real as it gets. And that's where I think the fear of being replaced by somebody doing our business in the core of what we do, I think is somewhat limited. And all having you here safely, even though we had 48 hours of snow now in Munich, shows that that core of what we believe in Lufthansa, and probably the whole industry, still exists. But obviously we wouldn't be here if we don't think that digitalization still changes the way we work. And I always put it in three groups. It's the way we work behind the scenes, how we train our people, how we optimize maintenance. It's the way we interact with our passengers, the way we communicate, the way we enhance our services. And the third element is that there are new businesses developing around flying people from A to B. Nobody wants to get into that. But that enhancing the value chain is something we don't want to leave to others in Lufthansa. So we're thinking, and not only thinking, we're acting in terms of opening up new businesses around the core of aviation, which is flying from A to B. So that's the three elements of the digital world we are in, but with our back safely against the wall of the real world, bringing you here safely and bringing you safely back home as well.
Speaking of opening up new businesses in the sky, I think we've got a short video we were going to show, if these guys have it, in terms of things you can do. Are they going to put it up there? Are they ready? When I first saw that video, I didn't understand it, so I'm hoping you can explain to me what the Runway in the Sky project is about.
Well, probably it must come as a surprise to you as an American. In Germany, flying still has an upside emotional potential. Here we call it air travel. In your country, it's air transport. And so we love to load up the emotions of flying with Lufthansa with talkabouts, with new ideas. And of course, here, the real and the digital world cross. We know that marketing nowadays is to create talkabouts in the social media channels. And what we are doing here on stage, first time ever, up in the air, having a catwalk, I'm still convinced we'll create another talk about that Lufthansa is more than just transport. And that's basically what it's all about. It's about a premium experience going beyond just moving from A to B. And we doing this in a couple of weeks. We had, maybe some of you know, we had R&B promote nights on Lufthansa planes of a great way to spend the night as of accommodation. Wonderful way to talk about Lufthansa, and to be honest, we probably have a better way to spend the night on our business class than some of the R&B hotels sold. So that is, I think, part of what we do, creating talks about also in new channels, in new media formats, and creating also a young crowd, attracting them to fly us rather than others.
We just had Tom Enders and Bertrand talking about a third revolution in air transport, in air travel, in the sector more generally. When you hear about competitors like Elon Musk, when you see what other people are doing, what do you think is the real future, the next step, and where are you guys leading on that in terms of digitalization?
Well, if you go to the core of, again, flying people from A to B, I'm an engineer. I love new ideas.
You're a pilot
I
as
love
well.
a pilot as well, yeah. So I love the idea of hypersonic transport, of shooting people up into the space and then bring them safely down for short travel times. To be honest, even most of you are younger than me. I think to the end of your business lives, you're all still going to be flying Boeings and Airbuses. It's just a slow progress to make that a mass travel experience. And we just bought 50 aircraft last year, record number, and we usually fly those aircraft 25 years. So all these aircraft will still be flying when I retire, and they look exactly like the aircraft we have now, just more modern, Airbus 350s, 320neos. So I think we need to put apart the technical ideas which are out there and the way it's really a mass phenomena to be used. Airplanes don't need pilots anymore, right? We all know that from the US military, but any of you wants to board a Lufthansa plane without a pilot, even if they strike once in a while, it's very comforting to have them on board. And I think that's why we need to put apart technical ideas and theoretical options and mass consumption of air travel, which in my view will progress a lot slower.
You, as we just said, you're a pilot as well, and you just talked about that and what is the next frontier of robots flying planes. But you've also said in the past that you don't think digital innovation is going to be a job reducer across the industry. How is that tension going to play out if we are going to automate parts, if we are going to constantly look at changing this, the back end and the front end of the customer experience? Is that really possible in this age without reducing jobs in your industry at Lufthansa itself?
Well, I think our industry has a huge advantage. Only a few industries in the real economy have. We are a growth industry. We are growing between 6% and 7% every year around the globe. Here in Europe and in the US, a little bit less because the market is more mature, but still it's between 3% and 4%. So the overall growth in our industry, driving jobs, flight attendants, pilots, that is almost a linear function. And then the question is, are digital services enhancing our value chain, creating additional jobs? So far they have. Or are they just replacing more jobs than they create by more efficiency? And because it's a service-oriented industry, so far the touch points to the customers basically have increased by digitalization, and the people behind the scenes working on that have also increased, at least due to the growth of the industry. So surely in our industry, digitalization is not really a job killer. Like in maintenance, it's more about efficiency added on by digitalization than reducing the work numbers per airplane. We just use the aircraft more hours per day because of digital opportunities. For example, we now have digital twins of all of our aircraft in our databases, so we always know about every aircraft, regardless where it is in the world, how all the systems on the aircraft, and we talk about thousands of parameters, are working at that point. And we always know which part of the aircraft needs to be replaced before it breaks down. So we use digitalization not to reduce man hours, but to optimize the way we do maintenance and to increase the numbers flown. So I think with the overall growth of aviation, I'm not worried about job killers by digitalization. And don't forget, and this is a little unsexy to you as a digital crowd, we are very conservative when it comes to the core of flying again. The computers we use in our aircraft, they are 20 years old, but they work. Okay? My iPhone is 2 weeks old, but it doesn't work with the same reliability I want my aircraft to work. So I'm glad that my engineers, I love my iPhone, don't get me wrong, but I'm glad that my engineers, and the one of Tom Enders in Airbus and the one of Boeing, are a little bit behind the hype of digital ideas, because we always need to create a fail-safe environment where things just cannot break down as often as my digital tools at home do.
You're talking a lot today about the reality of air travel, and let's talk to the front end of digitalization. And when you're trying to enhance that passenger experience, we're welcome to enhance the passenger experience in America as well. But what are the tensions that you see when you're running these programs, when you're trying to automate functions for consumers, when you're trying to improve that experience, and the tension between getting people to have greater willingness to personalize the experience and to give away their personal information in terms of the privacy debate?
Well, you're touching a very important point here. The biggest digital program we have in Lufthansa right now is called SMILE. And those letters stand for Surpass My Individual Lufthansa Experience, SMILE. And that is all about the idea that we know so much about our customers, that we believe we are well prepared to optimize our product and individualize it towards the individual needs of the customers. And to be honest, the younger our customers are, the more they're willing to give us data, but the more they're also expecting us to use that data to their advantage. And we are just at the beginning of that, but I think Lufthansa, who's in all modesty considered to be the most digital airline right now by the industry, by our competitors, definitely wants to maintain a head start here towards our competitors, that we can design the product, and the product for us includes the price you pay in a very individual way. So I easily see that 3 years from now on an Airbus 380 we have 500 passengers, that none of them has exactly the same product. They all paid a different price, or at least most of them. They have individual needs, having a seat assigned or just taking the last open seat, special diet requirements, special requirements about how they want their travel to be enhanced with ground service, hotel, and so on. So I think it's easily going that direction. And again, the younger our passengers are, the more they are willing to share data. And again, the more they are expecting us to use that data to their optimum.
You fly still about 200 times a year? Still, is that how much you're traveling?
I fly about once every working day, yeah, 200, 220 times.
So when you travel...
On Lufthansa mostly, so it's very bearable.
When it's running. When you fly that much and you look across what other people are offering, what do you think you see out there as the possible killer app in the industry that you want to have, that you'd want to build into your experience, either on the back end or the front end?
Well, I think the one thing I would be afraid of is an app which optimizes travel in the way my secretary does, okay? I have access to all digital tools in Lufthansa, and we have better tools than most others, but it's still a lot easier to tell my secretary, I want to fly an hour later. No app can beat that, of course, and I'm aware not all our passengers have a secretary like me. So if for every reason, that's why we are investing in apps which enhance the travel experience through all channels. If somebody designs an app which optimizes travel through various forms of travel, in a way a good secretary does, as old-fashioned as that might sound, that is something where I would be scared that we lose the interface to our customers. And that is, to be honest, my biggest fear. Again, we don't believe that flying Lufthansa is a commodity. We believe it is a special way of traveling. We make it more special, hopefully, in the future. We invested so much into our product. If for some reason somebody else takes away the interface between my product and my passengers, my customers, as it has happened in many, many other industries, going between the product and the customer, that's something I would be very afraid of. So we are working on creating the interface towards Lufthansa in an even better way and expanding the products and goods you can buy via that interface, because the big fear of losing that interface is probably the biggest one driving me.
But wouldn't you argue that in so many respects air travel has become commoditized already? I mean, is digitalization, what you're saying, the key to sort of keeping that relationship and making it a more premium experience and keeping that connection with the customer? But if that's all it is, that's not going to be a force that is long-term.
That's why making travel experience individual is also staying ahead of those who want to go between us and the passengers. If, like 5 years ago, all you basically could do is buy a booking class, first business economy, and bet the best price. That is easily to be replaced by various interfaces. One is Google Flight. But now we make it so much more individual what you can buy on the Lufthansa product. Again, in the airplane, on the ground, before you travel, after you travel, that none of the big reservation systems have been able to keep up with us. So that is part of not being a commodity. But in the end, it goes back to my opening remarks. Being on board of our plane is always in the need to be a better experience than to be on board of somebody else's, because that way we are not replaced with the commodity, the core product of what we are producing. And that's why in the end, digitalization will not allow us to not focus on our product, on our staff. As our staff is just as important in the digital world as it has been before in other industries. In my bank, to be honest, 20 years ago, it was important who I dealt with in my bank. My banking experience is fully digital now. I don't know about the individual persons behind that. If that would happen to Lufthansa, we would have a huge problem because our staff is definitely a differentiating factor. It's part of our brand. We invest a lot more into our staff than other airlines do. So commoditization is a big danger, and we're doing a lot not to be commoditized.
I want to ask you about virtual reality and the fact that you're a pilot as well. What's the difference when you look at sort of some of the things that some of the initiatives you're working on that are different for pilots and your staff than they are for the consumer end experience? And what do you think is going to be the game changer for pilots in terms of looking in this space?
Well, there's two things. We use especially virtual reality to enhance our pilot training. Pilot training basically deals with having our pilots experience things they will hopefully never experience in reality. And virtual reality has made it a lot more cheaper and a lot more real to have those experiences you hopefully will never have in reality. But it doesn't replace, of course, the flying hours we invest. So that is what we're using for training especially, and it works very well. But also, it comes back to my remarks about the old-fashioned computers we use. Whenever we introduce something which really deals with the safety of flying, we put it very much apart from modernization and the speed of new IT being available. When we now put the internet on board of our short-range airplanes, which we are starting actually this week, by the end of next week we'll have internet on board of all our short-range fleet. We totally keep that system apart from our aircraft operations system, so there's no way through the net to enter into the steering mechanism of an aircraft. So that is, again, as many gadgets there are around, and some of the people who fly small private planes have better IT at hand than our pilots, but our IT works in a fail-safe environment. So that's, again, a little bit on the enhancing passenger experience. We want to be as much up to the technical ideas and the creativity of people like you in this room or others as we can. When it comes to the core of what we do, because it's safety related, we are a very conservative bunch.
As many of you know, and people who watched this panel yesterday, we're going to have a new president in the US by the end of this week. And I know you met President Obama twice, not once but twice. And I wanted to just close this by asking you, when you look at some of the headwinds that we see politically in terms of anti-globalization, anti-business in some respects, what is the things that you worry about as a threat in terms of the political environment, the regulatory environment for your business, when we are going to see in the US this presidential shift and we see that sort of trend, that sort of rhetoric in many other governments across the West?
Well, in all modesty, as an airline, of course, we believe we are part of globalization. And we make globalization real, okay? Globalization for our passengers is not some, financial funds going around the world within seconds. It's about boarding an aircraft in Europe and leaving it in the US West Coast. So I'm a little bit concerned that apparently that positive experience of globalization airlines stand for has not reached enough people, and not only in the US, to be honest, around the world. So as we as business leaders think that globalization is just the best thing which ever happened, and many people, and this is part of Trump's campaign, can easily be convinced that it's to their disadvantage. So I think the answer of that, we just need more passengers flying around the world to create more positive experiences that globalization is real. Maybe going back 30 years, Europe, it's another issue we need to discuss, not here, but as Germans. I became a European by doing Interrail, which is a way to travel throughout Europe 4 weeks in a row. And that's where I met, people from Denmark and from Greece. And I'm sure that my Europeanness was basically born in that 4 weeks. So I think experiencing what Europe in this case, or come back to your question, what globalization is all about, is opening up people's minds and makes it a lot more difficult to convince those people that it's to their disadvantage, which apparently your president-elect has succeeded in. But in the end, the world, if you like it or not, is a very, very pragmatic place. So I'm sure we'll still be flying every morning, 10 o'clock from Frankfurt to New York, as we have done the last 40 years, and also to Washington.
Well, we'll see. I don't expect he'll change that. He likes flying. He has his own planes, though. thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for participating in the session. I hope your first experience at DLD, and you'll come back and repeat it again next year.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here.